Two Girls at a Wedding is a sketch series from creator, writer, actor and director Daz Black. Part 1 was published on the 29th of January 2019 and Part 2 on the 20th of August 2019. The plot focuses on a woman called Barbara, played by Black, attending the wedding/wedding reception in Part 2 of a former fling who she still clearly harbours feelings for. The other girl in the title refers to Deirdre, also played by Black. But the story definitely focuses on Barbara as opposed to Deirdre, although we see scenes featuring her in both parts 1 and 2. My aim for this video is to explore both of these sketches and offer critique and comparison to certain scenes as well as my own thoughts and opinions. I want to talk about the sketch from the angle of the filmmaking and showcase the things I believe could have been done differently. In the first part of this critique, I will be exploring and commenting on specific elements and ideas presented in the first sketch. Some scenes will be commented on more heavily than others, depending on whether I believe a scene requires more attention. These features include the mise-en-scène, the cinematography, pace, which relates to the editing, and the relationship between characters and their consistency. The first thing I want to talk about is the opening sequence of the first sketch. The sequence opens in a church accompanied by instrumental organ music. The shot of the flowers is composed well, ignoring the electricity boxes in the bottom left-hand corner of the frame. There is a nice focus pull, which is interesting to look at, and makes use of the camera in a compelling way. However, I do believe that there are some minor issues with this scene as a whole. The font at the beginning, displaying the title, is the same colour as the overexposed light coming from the windows. This is by no means critiquing the overexposure of the lights, as I believe they add to the sequence and complement it. The lights give the sketch the feeling of isolation in its own world. The spectator feels fully engrossed in the world of the story. Then we cut to the establishing shot of the church building. The establishing shot itself is fine, but the exterior of the church doesn't really complement the beginning of the sequence, and a more traditional church would have been better suited. One issue that I have with the majority of the first sketch is how bare it looks in terms of support artists and extras. This will be a criticism that I will revisit throughout. Having extras or supporting artists talking, looking at watches, even just walking down the street having nothing to do with the wedding would have made the scene feel more lifelike and busy. After the opening sequence, we head into scene 1, as Barbara enters and engages in conversation with groom-to-be Paolo, played by Hugh Samuel. The biggest concern I have with this scene is the severe lack of different shot types and editing. Black has given himself so much opportunity to elevate his comedic writing and complement Samuel's acting, but these opportunities are sadly missed. Samuel's detriment comes from the fact that the spectator can only see one side of his face for the vast majority of the scene, making his acting talent completely redundant as we are unable to see it. There is also a moment of tension where the two characters go to kiss. I feel like this could have been done differently. The first issue is that, to me, the almost kiss happens in a very strange location. The characters are seemingly out in the open. It's unrealistic that a man would be kissing or almost kissing someone else on his wedding day so obviously. It would have made more sense if the scene were to be filmed in an isolated room or in a corner somewhere, to imply that they were alone. Also, this could have been the perfect comedic moment had there been more shot types. The kiss doesn't express the tension it intends to because it is treated just like the rest of the scene, so there is no comparison whatsoever. There is no build-up and it appears flat and quite awkward. I'm imagining close-ups of Barbara and Paolo leaning in to kiss with exaggerated comical faces almost lost in the moment, and Samuel's eyes suddenly open as he realises what's happening. And then it could snap back to the two shot, physically distancing ourselves from the action just as they're distancing themselves from each other. It is a shame that this scene falls so flat, as Black and Samuel have great on-screen chemistry together, and it's clear that they're both invested in their roles and their performances.
I would be lying if I said I didn't think about it, Barbara. Times have changed, me and Sarah, we're together now.
No, you're right. You're getting married. This is crazy.
It's crazy.
Why are we talking about that? Like we said we wouldn't.
Barbara then leaves and sits with Deirdre, marking the beginning of scene 2. This scene is automatically so much better as we're getting more shots going back and forth between characters. The only issue is that both characters are played by Black. I'm in no way insinuating that Black shouldn't be playing these characters, but I have to question whether this attention to the different shots would have been taken had there been another actor involved in the scene, as obviously Black can't occur simultaneously in the same scene as two different characters, unless he uses some kind of split frame tool. Had this been the case, would we be seeing a repeat of what's just occurred? The two characters in one shot for the duration of the exchange? One small thing that two different shots can offer is different backgrounds. We aren't looking at the same bit of the church over and over, but it simulates a tennis match feel as we're turning our heads. But in reality, the camera is turning for us, watching this conversation unfold. The bride enters and joins the conversation with Barbara and Deirdre. And I enjoy this exchange between the three characters during this scene. Black's writing is elevated by the fact that the spectator doesn't get a choice in where their attention goes. Black has control of this scene, and it automatically feels so much punchier and tighter than the previous scene with Samuel. I feel, again, that having a few support artists dotted around in the background would have added to the scene, and it wouldn't feel as empty. This could have been something as simple as having somebody sat in the pew in front of the scene and turning a part of their body into a dirty shot, to try and fake the fact that there should be more people. Also, the way that Deirdre seems to always be telling Barbara to shush, having more people in the shot that could overhear them would have made more sense. This could be applied to the majority of the scenes, or perhaps use some stock footage of people at a wedding. Also, I have an issue with the comprehension of the final part of this scene, as it doesn't really remain consistent. Deirdre reassures Barbara that she would get married someday, and then for some reason suggests the groom.
I just want to get married. Is it so hard to find a man who will marry me?
Oh, don't be silly. You'll get married one day. Wait, didn't you and Paolo have a thing once? He's looking at you.
This is jarring as Deirdre seemed very happy for the bride and groom, referring to the bride as our Sarah at the beginning of the scene to indicate that she cares for her and could be related to her.
I'm so excited. I can't believe our Sarah's getting married.
This transforms to her then joining in with the jokes about Sarah, to then seemingly wanting Barbara to get back together with the groom. This catalyses the shot where we see Paolo looking intensely at Barbara, exaggerated for comedic effect.
He's looking at you.
Oh, please. Practically hasn't looked at me in years.
This would have been funnier if the character referred to had been someone completely unrelated to the rest of the story, to indicate that the only men interested in Barbara are the ones that she does not reciprocate feelings with. The sketch reaches its climax as the wedding begins. I like the use of the establishing shot again. It makes for a good transition to the ending, indicating that some time has passed and also reprises the music. Barbara telling the vicar to fuck off at the beginning of the ceremony is the climax to the piece. She has been saying unpleasant comments about the bride all day because of the jealousy she is feeling, and all this seems to come to a head when she cannot deal with it any longer. In my opinion, I think this could have been elongated to make more of an impact. The fuck off appears far too early in the closing of the sketch.
We are all gathered here today because we all wish to be in the presence of true love.
Oh, fuck off!
Black could have used more footage to show the rising tension, quickening the pace with the editing, and perhaps at the I do's the fuck you could have occurred. Also, I felt that the fuck you was out of character, especially occurring when it did. Barbara has spent the entire sketch trying to conceal her feelings in connection with the groom, only for this to completely unravel at the line, because we all wish to be in the presence of true love. This reaction seems premature. Barbara leaves and the sketch ends. One thing I wanted to add before I move on to the second instalment of the series is the entire context of this relationship doesn't particularly make sense to me. I feel sorry for the bride, as she's clearly marrying a man who doesn't want to be with her, but Barbara instead. The original premise would have been much more humorous if none of Barbara's advances were being reciprocated, and this was slowly rendering her insane and frantic, willing to do anything to be with him. Part of the conversation with Deirdre could have been that Barbara was so certain that he wanted her back, but this would obviously be false. But since the groom has been so obviously receptive to Barbara's advances, the comedy is lost. and she isn't a lonely, deranged character anymore. She actually has a point. If the groom wanted to be with the bride, he wouldn't have accepted Barbara's advances, but he clearly has. And then he has the audacity to be shocked at the end of the piece, as if he hasn't led her on the entire sketch. And this ties nicely into part 2 and the way the spectator views Barbara. Almost 7 months after the release of the original Two Girls at a Wedding, Two Girls at a Wedding 2 was released, set in the reception of Paolo and Sarah. Sarah is an unseen character in this sketch. Again, I will be focusing on certain elements throughout the second half of this critique. You'll see that some issues that I found in the first sketch have been resolved, and some haven't. I will be commenting on the mise-en-scène, the cinematography, editing, and my overall opinion on the relationship between Paolo and Barbara. Firstly, the opening sequence sets the tone well. The inclusion of the actors' names, dancing and cursive font makes the production look more professional. The music fits and is complementary to the action. The spectator can infer that not all is well, and induces a feeling of suspense and excitement to see what's next up, presumably Barbara's sleeve. This differs from the music of the first instalment. The church organ is optimistic and cannot prepare the spectator for the chaos about to ensue. But the sequel has a dark tone from the get-go, as the spectator already knows that we're in a state of emotional disarray. The use of supporting actors in this scene makes it look so much better. Together with the music, it makes the room look livelier and believable as a wedding reception. The muted conversation between Paolo and the father reintroduces us to familiar characters, although Harvey Quinn now plays the father, and shots of new characters to show that we have new characters. One thing I briefly mentioned in the first part is something that I've noticed in both pieces, and that is some clumsily included mise-en-scène. For example, the notice board in the beginning sequence of the sequel and the electricity boxes in the first instalment. It is important to remember that everything in the frame needs to be there on purpose and to serve the shot well, and to be as immersive to the world of the story as possible. Right from the get-go, we have a close-up of Barbara entering the wedding reception, so we know that she will be the focus, like the original sketch, where she enters in the same way. Close-ups serve Black's acting well and showcase the character and her emotions. Scene 1 occurs in a bathroom, where Barbara is met with a character played by Tahila Clifford. I'm glad that Black decided to use a secluded space, like a bathroom, for this conversation between these characters. Immediately, we see the tension between them.
Can we expect any other theatrics? Maybe a fucking speech?
Listen, say what you want, that's fine. But anything else comes out of that hole in your face, I'm gonna stick my hand up your vagina, turn you inside out and show everyone how fucking ugly you are on the inside too. Okay.
One small thing I may have added is a flush before Clifford exits the cubicle. Just a small detail that is quite nitpicky. Although I appreciate the secluded location of the bathroom, I was quite concerned that the scene would have a lot of white wall syndrome, and the spectator would quickly forget that it's a bathroom. However, Black has framed it in a way that a lot of the whiteness of the shot is covered by both characters, so it becomes more interesting to look at. Also, I am so glad that there are reaction shots. It really feels that Black is holding our hands through this exchange. He knows exactly where he wants us to look, and this enhances the acting and the writing in a huge way. I feel like this is so much more dynamic than its counterpart in the first sketch, with Samuel and Black's dialogue for 1 minute 40 seconds in exactly the same shot. Again, in scene 2, the exchange between Deirdre and the father is much more interesting, with frequent cuts between the individual characters and then both together as a two-shot. The acting between Black and Quinn here is brilliant. They definitely complement each other well. The father is also a very well written and performed character.
Did you like the part where I enunciated to the back of the room? Clearly.
Yes, yeah, I heard every word. It was very powerful.
I always wanted to be an actor, you know.
Really?
Yes. My father, he was always against it. He said, you have to serve God. And here I am. I remember once he gave me some money to buy some wine for the parish, and I went away and bought headshots with it.
Oh, what happened after that?
Yes, he was furious. Oh. Arsehole! He said to me. No son of mine will ever go to the theatre!
On the whole, the sketch flows a lot better than the first one. This is demonstrated here in the next scene, scene 3, where Deirdre tries to stop Barbara from talking to Paolo. There are moments that I forget that they're both played by Black. Their exchange feels so effortless and natural, which really says a lot about Black's acting talent and the talent of the editor. Also, the ending flows so well, where Barbara walks away, and we know this is happening as Deirdre is following her with her eyes. This is so simple, but I find it to be so clean and moves the story along well, and plays into the illusion that Deirdre and Barbara are two individuals. Scene 4 puts a bit of a halt to the dynamic camera work that we've been seeing, and the exchange between Paolo and Barbara resorts back to the static 2 shot. It's a shorter sequence than the first sketch by 31 seconds, but this could have been a great opportunity to include reaction shots like the scenes before it. The second section of the scene, featuring Paolo and Barbara dancing, I feel fits the 2 shot a little better, as there's movement in the scene, and I understand that differing shots will be difficult to piece together in the edit. The scene itself is more interesting than watching a conversation for over a minute, as we can see them moving together and their connection. The moving handheld camera adds to this aesthetic. The whisper featured in this scene could have been shot with close-ups, as Samuel isn't acting to the camera but to the space beyond the frame, with his profile to the camera making the whisper completely redundant. The climax of the sketch, after Barbara is rejected by Paolo, lasts a lot longer than the first sketch.
No, you know, Barbara, you had your shot. That's enough. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, that's right, you all stare. Have a good look! Look at the crazy X!
However, again, I would have added some reaction shots or audible gasps from the partygoers, and maybe shown the DJ stopping the music along with the record scratch, and maybe added some microphone feedback. I like the ending with the music change and the Cinderella type running after somebody. And again, I enjoy the fact that we don't have to see every action in the sketch to know that it's happening. Keeping the shot on Paolo allows for the spectator to register his emotional response, as opposed to seeing Barbara drive away, which we already know is happening. It's a good way to leave the spectator wondering whether Barbara is still alive after the car crash, whether Paolo chose to chase after her, or stay at the party with his new wife. Again, the issue I have with Barbara and Paolo's relationship overall is that I don't root for them. I think Paolo is a pretty awful human being, going from practically kissing Barbara to humiliating her, crying that it's our special day when he's completely led her on again, like in part 1. Like in the first sketch, I believe that Paolo is gaslighting the ever-living fuck out of Barbara, and I feel quite sorry for her. In conclusion, I'm speculating that the first sketch had considerably less time to shoot and edit, as the whole thing feels quite rushed. The second part feels much smoother and punchy to watch. I believe the observations that I've mentioned could have enhanced the sketch considerably, and in some parts, Black did himself an injustice deciding to shoot some of the scenes the way he did. In the comments of Two Girls at a Wedding 2, Black states that there's a part 3 already in the works, so hopefully we see that in the near future, as I believe the characters and the story are compelling to watch, and I really want to know what happens next.